What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we have a lot to catch up on for DC's Absolute Power. So this picks up with the Batman tie-in, and as we've covered so far, if you need a refresher, you'll find a link to the playlist at the end of this, but the long and short of it is that Amanda Waller has basically launched an attack against the superheroes and has siphoned off like 98% of the superhero population's powers. So most all superheroes are gone. Batman himself was on the mission for a mother box because he was trying to find out why Amanda Waller even wanted one in the first place. And this is amazing. So what goes on here is that with Batman and Catwoman on this mission and essentially on the planet of Zarnia, which used to belong to Lobo before he wiped everybody out, they're going face to face with the Suicide Squad. And Batman gives us this really cool monologue over the course of this whole thing, right? He says like, I've been to space before to other planets, but never with Selina. I try not to think of it, how far we are from home, how to separate for even a moment could become permanent. I'm used to knowing my surroundings, but out here, it's all mystery and danger. So I do what I know how to do. I fight like hell. And that's the coolest thing, right? Because when you're dealing with a mother box, you never know where it's going to send you or what's going to happen. And so for the most part, it's just kind of Batman holding his own against like Gunsmith, and Deadeye and different people like that. And it's kind of cool, right? There does come a point when Catwoman is attacked by Black Alice. She'll become marginally important later on down the line, but for the moment, she's not overly significant, right? Basically just like cracking this safe and getting this mother box is paramount for Batman and Catwoman. Now, the other part of this is that if they take the mother box away from Amanda Waller, it's a tool they have at their disposal, right? Meaning they can just jump in and out of virtually any location anytime they want to, because mother boxes are nothing if not just grandiose teleportation boxes. The problem with this is the timer's counting down. And when that happens, a portal activates. Now, here's the cool thing, right? This is where I told you the ending of this is gonna be nuts, because what happens is Batman says no explosion, no poison gas. The tomb is unfolding. What kind of countdown was that? And so Batman kind of muses to himself for a moment while he's dealing with like Deadeye, right? Which I don't know about you guys, but whenever I read Deadeye in DC Comics now, I hear Idris Elba's voice from the Suicide Squad film. I mean, I know Idris Elba was Bloodsport, but still, for some reason, it sticks. I don't know why. But there's this kind of reality that Batman really speaks to Deadeye per se, where he says, I've been tracking the family history that's going on with you, and I learned that one, Amanda Waller is your aunt, right? That's why you call her Amanda. It's not why you call her Waller. And he's like, you didn't even notice what you were walking through. Your family stolen by Waller, including your mother. So it's just one of these things where effectively his life was kind of stolen by Amanda Waller, and it's just been nothing but lies, which for the most part is normal. I wouldn't say that Deadeye's important enough that this is going to be like a significant plot thread over time. That may or may not be the case, but it does feed in to Absolute Origins, which basically tells the origin of Amanda Waller really for the first time in a meaningful way in DC Comics. Although I think it's like for the first time ever in DC Comics that we're getting an origin for Amanda. But of course, after this, focus shifts to Bizarro, right? Because Bizarro at that point is kind of being used by Batman as a distraction of sorts, in the sense that like Batman gets in front of him so that when Gunsmith starts shooting, that he accidentally shoots Bizarro in the back. That's really kind of offering some measure of a distraction, because with Bizarro being basically dumb, he thinks the Gunsmith was shooting at him on purpose, right? So it's just kind of a momentary distraction. But the fact is, it does buy Batman a moment of time, which allows Catwoman to continue basically hacking this safe in order to gain this mother box. And eventually she does. But here's the kicker, right? One of the things that happens is you end up getting this kind of carnivorous flying scorpions, right? That just sort of start flying through the area. And for the most part, members of the Suicide Squad start bailing out. Not all of them, but like some of them do. And so when Batman goes back on the offensive to fight Deadeye again, that what ends up happening is the boom tube closes, right? It shuts down. And Batman's like, okay, this is a problem, right? Now, this is, I told you guys, this is when it gets dope, right? Because Selina's like, okay, like, how do we turn it back on? And the response of Batman is the mother box can respond to thought, but I can't seem to talk to it. And he says, wait, Waller was shielding its energy. Her timer knocked out the tomb and its shielding. Why would she do that? And then Batman gives us this monologue where he says, the air chills. Even the scorpions know fear. If Waller was to lose the mother box, no one was to have it. Everyone would die and it would go home. It would become a beacon. And in the middle of that, Gunsmith is talking and it's like, I want to go home. And then it's just flat, right? Gunsmith gets obliterated. And that's where Batman's like, it would become a beacon for Darkseid. And he sees Darkseid off in the distance, right? And like he just tells Selina, run, just run. Like we have to get out of here as fast as we can. And Selina's never met Darkseid before, right? Catwoman's never encountered this guy. She has no idea who he is. And Batman's like, he's death, right? We cannot beat him. If we try to fight him, we will die. His Omega beams will incinerate us. There's nothing we can do. They get the mother box just in time. They open the portal and jump through right before the Omega beams reach them and incinerate them. Now, that's the last time you see Darkseid over the course of this. But one of the things I love about how Darkseid's been handled recently in DC Comics is he's no longer just like a dude that Batman can beat with prep time, especially in that Batman Superman story when like they encounter Darkseid and Darkseid just walks all over him with the greatest of ease and the whole time is just talking trash. That's how you do a god in DC Comics, right? He's just this presence that when he arrives, the best you can hope to do is flee for your life and try to survive. It is amazing. So at this point, we switch over to Superman. Now, the other half of this is that, again, because all these superheroes have lost their powers, again, different people are on different missions. Where Batman and Catwoman are trying to find a mother box, Zatanna and Superman are trying to find the map of Mordru. The reason why is because one of the things that's explained, or at least was explained over the course of Absolute Power, is sure, you can like fly from one place to another, different things like that, but in order to kind of operate under the radar and without Amanda Waller knowing what they're doing, attaining the map of Mordru would allow them to use what are called the dark paths, basically shadows, essentially. So it's almost like opening an invisible door that takes you from Metropolis to like Gotham, right? You kind of pass through like this netherworld. And so it's really, really cool because what goes on here is in meeting with Neron, this guy is incredibly powerful, but incredibly duplicitous. And in fact, those of you guys who are unfamiliar with DC Comics, this is one of those very, very rare moments when a superhero from the traditional DC landscape meets with like the whole angelic side, Lucifer and the presence, all that kind of stuff, because Neron is a fallen angel from hell, right? I mean, this guy's pretty incredible in terms of the kind of stuff that he can do and how powerful he is. But again, he's very Mephisto-like in DC Comics. Now, truth to tell, I don't know who came first, Mephisto or Neron. And honestly, I could look it up, but I don't think it really matters all that much. But they're very similar in how they work. And so when the conversation between them happens, what goes on is basically he says, I want something from you, right? That like when they sit down, they're invited by him, right? They sit down at the table, that Neron basically says like, indulge me, right? I know all about Amanda Waller and what she's been up to with her power stealing Amazos. And he says, you need the map of Mordru so you can sneak around in the shadows and get past her defenses. So what can you give me for it, right? For this particular map. And that's where Superman's like, what do you want? Because we're not selling our souls. And the response of Neron is, please, Superman, like your soul is one of the most purest that I've ever seen, but you're never going to die, so it's pointless. And where he's kind of like, I mean, I've died, right? The response of Neron is, and yet here you sit, alive and well. Because truthfully, he didn't die. It turned out he was in a Kryptonian healing matrix because DC decided to dupe everybody in the 1990s by tricking them into thinking Superman died. And then he looks at Zatanna, right? And he says, after everything you've done, the dark magic you've conjured and the company you keep, your soul is practically mine already. And he says, no, I want something much more interesting from you, Superman. I want something precious. I want you to lie. And where Superman's kind of like, what? Right? The response of Neron is, you're the living embodiment of all that is good in the world, a man of truth. I will give you this map that you so desperately need, and in exchange, you'll betray yourself. You will lie for me. And so Superman's just kind of like, okay, you've got a deal. I'll lie for you. And that's where Zatanna's like, no, like you cannot make a deal with a demon like this. And Superman's just like, it's okay, Zatanna, let's go. And so it's interesting because Neron kind of taunts him, right? Like you think you're clever and that sort of thing. And he says, but I also know your secret about the anger you hide. This is not over. And that's where Superman's like, I know. Now here's a cool thing, because I'm actually kind of excited to see where this goes. For those of you guys who have been keeping track of solicitations, there's gonna be a fight between Superman and Doomsday, who just escaped hell in DC Comics. Yes, Doomsday went to hell. It was amazing. We covered it. But I feel like this is gonna come back to roost. I don't know exactly how it's gonna happen, but I feel like it will. Plus, I'm also excited to see an enraged Superman that just cuts loose, right? And just allows himself to be angry like he did against Darkseid in Justice League Unlimited. Unlimited. So ultimately, the two of them end up accessing the shadows and then head into what's called the Dark Roads. And it's kind of cool because making their way through there, one of the things that goes on is that Zatanna kind of reveals, right? She says, Oliver Queen said Waller cut us off from the multiverse, but the multiverse has shadows as well. Waller might have stolen all of our powers, but there is a whole multiverse of heroes that we can call in as a backup, right? And Superman says something like that would turn the tide of this war in an instant. But that's where you kind of get this sort of conversation that goes back and forth, right? Where she says it takes a moment to tame the map, to get it to take you where you want to go, that it basically takes you wherever your heart genuinely wants to be. And so it's kind of manipulating your own personal desire, which on the surface seems very, very easy, right? But if you were somebody struggling of like limited means, right? You had very little money, and I were to say, okay, what's your heart's desire? On the surface, you would say like to have $1 billion. Okay, cool. But why do you want that $1 billion? And it would be like, well, because I want to have an easy life. Well, what does that easy life look like? And that's what we're talking about here, right? That like there is the kind of, upside down triangle type of thing, right? All the money in the world. Okay, well, what's at the very bottom of that upside down triangle? The thing that you will get ultimately that you want the most after having all the money in the world, right? Which is a stress-free life, right? Something along those lines. And so it's really cool because again, it kind of feeds into the nature of people. Now, there is also kind of a bit of a discussion about the nature of why Superman hates magic so much, that he again does have a weakness to magic, but Zatanna also kind of hits on the idea that like he can't control it, and that Superman with all of his power and all of his capabilities is a guy who doesn't know what it's like to live a life without control, because he could kill everybody on Earth if he wanted to. There are virtually no villains on the planet that he cannot kill, and it'd be precious few, right, that he actually couldn't kill. I mean, you probably count them on one hand, right? But the other part of this, as Zatanna talks about, is the nature of what it means to use the map. The map itself feeds on magic, but because she has no magic left, right, her powers were effectively siphoned off, it's feeding on her life force. And it's one of these things where it's a very personal experience for her. And she kind of hits the nature of Superman, right? Because he says, you're wasting away. Are the Dark Roads doing this? And she says, no, it's the map. It pulls from a person's magic, but since I don't have any, it pulls from my life force. And Superman says, you never told me the map could do this. If I had known, I would not have let you come here. And she's like, let me do what? Right? Like, I need my magic back, Clark. No matter the sacrifice, I need it. And the response of Superman is an answer that comes more from a lack of understanding than a genuine place of empathy, because he says, we'll get our powers back, we will, but you need to know you're so much more than magic, Zatanna. And she's like, am I? Right? Like, you're Superman and you're Clark Kent. Hell, you're even Kal-El. I'm Zatanna, right? That's not some kind of a code name that I give myself to inspire hope in people. It's my actual name, right? My magic is everything. She says, this thing that you say you hate is my everything. I barely have friends, and the closest I have to a relationship is a chain-smoking British guy who sold his soul to not one, but 3 demons. You might have a life outside of your costume, Superman, but Waller didn't just take my powers, she took my life. She took my identity. So it's really, really, really cool to see Zatanna presented in this way. I honestly have never loved Zatanna more than I have over the course of this one page in this comic book. In Superman number 18 from 2024, right? It's amazing. But ultimately, their path ends up leading them to the Bleed and the House of Heroes. Now, here's the kicker to this. Normally, you would expect Captain Carrot. I love Captain Carrot. Captain Carrot's a super bunny. Normally, you would expect Captain Carrot to show up here, right? Nope, because they've all been crushed. Absolutely destroyed. And the question has to be asked, what being out here could be powerful enough to crush basically the multiversal Justice League, right? The House of Heroes. Now, when they get there, they actually end up coming across Dr. Light. The Dr. Light, after the whole Dark Crisis thing and basically the restoration of the multiverse, they'd just kind of been out there traveling and visiting the multiverse. And then Amanda Waller sent one of her forces out there, or at least a member of her force, to deal with everything that was going on. If you don't know anything about Dark Crisis, it's not important. All you need to know is that the multiverse was basically restructured. So it's like it blinked out and blinked back, and that was essentially it. And now they were exploring it, quote unquote, for the first time, right? This new multiverse. But more so than that, while Dr. Light doesn't know everything that's going on, one of the things she says is that Amanda Waller's up to something, and it's something big if it involves the multiverse, right? And so when the question's asked, like, who did all of this, right? Like, what's blocking us off from the multiverse? That's where Dr. Light says she sent an agent to live in the Bleed, right? right? The space between universes, basically. It lay in wait for the last year, helping her stop travel between worlds. If it knows that we are here, it will kill us. We need to go now. And that's where Superman asks, like, what could possibly live in the bleed? I mean, just the sheer amount of tidal forces in the bleed, right? Literally, the fabric of creation would be enough to tear virtually anybody apart. I mean, it might even kill Superman, truth to tell. And that's where this voice comes out of nowhere and says, she's talking about me, right? And he just says, run. And where no one knows what it is, Superman knows what it is immediately, because it actually goes back to the Batman Superman comic in the first volume when Batman and Superman merged using the ring of Hal Jordan. It was really amazing when it happened, right? We'll post a link to it, maybe down in the description. I don't know, because we're already posting a playlist at the end of the video, but it was really cool, right? But seemingly this played out the exact same way, but there's huge differences here. Number one, when Batman and Superman did it, they basically used a Green Lantern ring. Number two, this guy's using a Sinestro ring. Now this guy says, you can call me Confusion, but here's the problem with this, right? They make the statement, or at least Dr. Light says, he's from Earth 3. Now, if you've been following DC Comics for the last couple years or so, it's Ultraman who comes from Earth 3, right? Like an evil version of Superman. The evil version of Batman from Earth 3 is Owlman, but those guys are dead, right? I don't remember exactly how Owlman died, but I feel like he's been dead since the lead up, really since like Darkseid War and the lead up to Doomsday Clock, when he was killed by Dr. Manhattan from the Watchmen comics. But Ultraman was killed by Injustice Superman, right? When those two guys crossed over in DC Comics, right? Like, he's been dead for a while. And Superman even says that, right? He's like, you're not Ultraman or Owlman. And like, Confusion doesn't get a chance to tell him who he is, because like, he's just hit by the pieces of the House of Heroes that just comes crashing down on all of them. And so ultimately, the only thing they can do is try to open one of the portals to get them out of the Shadow Realm and bring them back into the real world. But Zatanna's dying, right? The map is continually feeding off of her life energy. And she's like, I don't have the power to do that. And the response of Superman is, then we'll do it together, right? And she's like, but like, magic makes you weak. And he's like, if ever there was a time to face my fears, it's now. Besides, the map has been calling me ever since we started this journey. It wants me, but I cannot do it without you, Zatanna. And so they end up using the map. And when they do, it opens an access hole, literally a shadow, for them to pass through to re-enter into the real world, which coincides with like Mercy, the one-time assistant of Lex Luthor, and Lois Lane, who are literally like crash landing to safety. They end up at what's basically the Fortress of Solitude, and when they get there, Superman's shadow appears on the wall. Lois Lane reaches through, pulls Superman out alongside Zatanna and Dr. Light, and then they're off to the races, because now all these roads, Batman, Superman, they all converge on Absolute Power issue number 3, which is not the conclusion to it, but it's amazing. So switching over to Absolute Power number 3, right? What we end up doing here is picking up on Themyscira. And what ends up going on is that because Batman and Superman haven't returned yet, that you still have like basically Nightwing kind of running the show, organizing everybody and all that kind of stuff. There is a bit of a disagreement between himself and Big Barda, in the sense that Barda's just like, we should just, kill whoever we have to kill and that kind of thing. And her normal, I'm from, Apocalypse or, the realm of the new gods, and killing people is just what we do, right? That kind of thing. But at the end of the day, Nightwing is the one that just kind of like pulls the strings, right? And says, here's what's happening. So he says, Black Canary elected to strike out on her own to figure out why Green Arrow had sided with Amanda Waller. Because Green Arrow siding with Amanda Waller is seemingly how all of this kicked off in the first place, right? That like, he gave her the information she needed in order to launch an attack against the Justice League that was a surprise attack and just start taking them all out. Now, of course, he also says that Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Robin, and Zatanna are carrying out their assigned missions, which of course, again, we just covered here. And he says, Waller thinks the rest of us are beaten and broken, which is what we want. The last thing she's expecting is a counterattack. So we hit back hard. And the question's kind of asked here, like, with what? Like, what do we hit back with, right? I mean, Plastic Man's got a broken arm and the dude's virtually indestructible, right? Like, we have a ragtag group of superheroes here. Most of us are like reserve members of the Justice League or reserve members of the Justice Society of America, right? Like the geriatrics of the superhero world. Like, what are we gonna do here, right? Don't misunderstand. The JSA is dope. Don't get me wrong. But like, they're a bunch of old folks, right? So it's just like, what do we do? That's when Hal Jordan shows up and he's like, the good stuff, right? Like a bunch of weapons from Justice League storage. Captain Cold's gun, Weather Wizard's wand, a lightning axe. It's not going to be enough to like destroy these Amazos who have been stealing our power, copying our powers, and so on and so forth, but you won't be defenseless. At the very least, in these conflicts, you can even buy time. Now, hell's bells, here's the thing. Here is how pointless Aquaman is. Here's how little anybody takes Aquaman seriously, right? Aquaman is being put on a team with Blue Beetle and Red Tornado. Nobody takes Aquaman seriously, right? But more so than that, like one of the other things that goes on is they realize that like there's a guy named John Starr on Amanda Waller's Suicide Squad. And literally Nightwing says Aquaman's sea friends, right, have pinpointed their headquarters. So basically Aquaman was talking to Fish and the Fish said, hey, go over here, right? This is where you want to be at. I don't know. Nemo helped Aquaman. And so what they do is they all just kind of split off. Now, one of the things you'll notice here as well is that the Flash is basically running around on a motorcycle that looks like it came from the Akira anime, and it's amazing. Wally West is powerless, so that's why he has this motorcycle in the first place. But I'm not gonna lie to you guys, right? I would not be against DC Comics just having Wally West use this motorcycle for the foreseeable future. I know that he's supposed to be running super fast, but I mean, this thing is pretty dope. If I'm honest with you guys, he looks amazing. I absolutely love it. But here's one of the other cool caveats that goes on. What we end up doing here is we switch over to Amanda Waller, who starts talking to Failsafe. Right now, again, Failsafe was the robot that Batman built in case he ever went rogue, and then it was believed that Batman did, so Failsafe activated, and there's a whole storyline there. But in essence, between Failsafe and the Brainiac Queen, essentially the wife that Brainiac tried to make for himself, they're basically the kind of masterminds behind these Amazo robots that are stealing people's powers or, siphoning powers off and different things like that. And what she says is, she says, you assured me your task force would be unstoppable. Explain to me how some of them appear to be running at less than peak capacity. And that's where Failsafe analyzes all of them remotely and says, running remote diagnostics, they seem to have absorbed some sort of infection. And where Amanda Waller's like, are we talking about like a virus or something like that? His response is, no, right? Not a virus per se, Amanda. It's an infection of identity. It's something that we had not considered. They're so powerful, they didn't just take the powers of the superheroes that they've defeated. They actually started taking basically slivers of their moral compass. And Amanda Waller gives what's probably the best response to this, right? She's like, you're telling me that goodness is a superpower? Which was my exact response when I read that. I was like, wait, you're telling me morality is a superpower? Apparently it is, ladies and gents, and it'll manifest basically with Jade Stone, who we'll talk about here in a second. But one of the things that happens here, and it's really kind of a indication of the fact that Failsafe is becoming full of hubris, because what he does is he issues a kind of reset, right, to all the Amazos that are out there, at least those whose programming isn't so far gone. And he says, it won't take more than an instant, not enough time to cause any problems I shouldn't imagine. But the Flash is one of them that they're chasing after, Barry Allen. Barry Allen does have his powers, unlike Wally, who is powerless. And so that momentary instant is just enough for Barry Allen to get away, right? To basically escape from this Amazo. And then in the middle of it, he's hit by basically this guy that comes out of nowhere, right? Not attacked, but hit with a message where this guy asks him, he's like, Flash. And that's where Flash is like, who is this? Is it Hal? Like, did somebody do something? My guy's still in pursuit, but I've picked up some real distance. And this guy says, it isn't Hal, right? And so the person's like, are you speaking through a modulator? I can't tell who you are. And this guy says, it doesn't matter. Just someone that you can trust. Waller's running a supermax prison off the coast of Gamora. You need to get to the lower levels now. And where Flash asks, like, okay, like mystery man, what do I do when I get there? This guy responds, what Flash always does in a crisis, save the world or die trying. And then he cuts the communication. At that point, you switch over to like Aquaman and his guys, right, who were on their mission, and they end up coming across the Suicide Squad that's been brought back after their mission with Batman. And initially Aquaman just gets the absolute tar punched out of him. Like, it literally looks like Bizarro punched a hole in his chest. But here's the cool thing, right? He says, like, hold him back with the weather wand. I brought something that I think can stop him. And so, like, Bizarro kills one of the members of Aquaman's team and then punches a hole through Aquaman and kills him, only for us to find out none of it's actually happening. It's an illusion. How? Because Aquaman brought a Black Mercy plant. When was the last time any of us saw those? Now, for those of you guys who don't know what Black Mercy plants are, these are plants that attach to you, and then they either force you to experience your greatest dreams or your worst nightmares, depending on what kind of mind you have. Because everything's backwards with Bizarro, he's experiencing nightmares instead of dreams. But this basically leads to like Aquaman and his guys tracking down John Stark. Now, they don't know exactly why they need him. Of course, he's called the Time Commander, so potentially some kind of time travel manipulation will be involved, although I hope it's not going to be that hand-wavy of an ending. But they're like, okay, we got to grab this guy. They do momentarily come across Black Alice, but one of the cool things about Red Tornado is because of the helmet that he has, which he's still kind of learning about the nature of its powers, that it's almost like a star brand, right? Where it just kind of has its own power set that activates based on the need of the user as opposed to the user controlling the helmet. And it basically grants them intangibility, which gives them a kind of moment to escape, but not fast enough because Deadeye fires off a shot. He hits Red Tornado. They end up grabbing him and just fleeing as fast as they possibly can. So it is a cool thing here, right? Because everybody's just kind of struggling, right, in their own way. And so what you do is you pick back up on Themyscira with Artemis and Mr. Terrific. And the cool thing here is that as they're talking, number one, I haven't seen Artemis since like Red Hood and the Outlaws. She was like, if I remember correctly, she was an outcast Amazonian, I believe. I'm a little fuzzy on her history, so don't take that as an absolute, but she is cool. Like, she's such an amazing character, and I really wish they would do more with her. But she says, like, your request has been honored. Everything is in place. And that's where Michael Holt just says, thank you, Artemis. Magic is way out of my wheelhouse, though I am getting a hand on Ten's technomancy. Now, what ends up going on is in the middle of all of this, suddenly the Brainiac Queen emerges. Because she is, in effect, a sentient computer, she can enter out of any and all locations physically, right? Like her essence transports to a location, then she co-ops all the machinery and creates a physical form for herself, right? And she shows up and says, Mother, before speaking to Amanda Waller, we have located the fugitives and uncovered their base. Their subjugation is imminent. And that's where Mr. Terrific is like, and he's like, oh God. And Jonathan Kent shows back up here because one of the things that we've seen over the course of Absolute Power is that Superman's son Jonathan was taken over by the Brainiac Queen and turned into like the ultimate Amazo, right? So this guy just single-handedly takes pretty much all of these guys out. Now here's one of the cool things that goes on, right? The fight earlier between Big Barda and Nightwing was not just about, should they kill, all that kind of stuff. It was about the idea that Nightwing had a plan, but he wouldn't spill the beans on what that plan was. And so what Big Barda says is the others will not make it back in time. This fight is ours alone. I have readied our defenses. She loads up a kryptonite bullet, which will kill John, right? Like if it hits him, it will kill him. And that's where like Raven's like, no. Nightwing said not to do that. And the response of Barda is Batman's child is not here. This is a battlefield from which there is now no exit. Compassion is a luxury we do not have. Today, we kill or we die. It is that simple. And she goes to fire off the shot, but she's literally hit by one of the sticks from Nightwing. And he's like, no, right? You are not shooting Jonathan. Number one, because I'm in charge and I decide who lives and who dies. And number two, because I know something that you don't. A secret that Terrific and I could not risk getting overheard with super hearing from Jonathan himself. We didn't know where he was or if he could hear us. And so he literally calls to him and he says, Jonathan, down here. He's like, you want to fight me? Let's go toe to toe. Meet me on my level. And Jonathan ends up landing right down where Nightwing is, and the trap is sprung, right? Literally, Nightwing says, Terrific's idea, Artemis's execution. The moment John set foot on the ground uninvited, he sprung the trap. The island is suffused with magic. And right now, every bit of it is being focused on Jonathan, purging his system of Brainiac Queen circuitry. And that's where Nightwing tries to talk him out, right? And it's just like, John, like, you have to listen to me. You have to break this control. And the coolest thing is like, John's doing it, right? Like he's breaking the control of the Brainiac Queen, but is taking everything he has. And so like where Nightwing screams like, you have to stop, John just says, Dad, right? And then like immediately breaks free of the influence of the Brainiac Queen when he thinks about everything that he's done so far, right? All the terrible things that he's done. But while the Brainiac Queen had the ability to influence him, he had the ability to influence her. And he says, I've been in inside your head too. Waller lied to you. Everything she taught you about us was poisoned by her hate. What you really need to know about us, about who we are, is the truth. And he literally shows the Brainiac Queen everything that makes the superheroes, that in times of need, in moments of high duress, they are always there. Yes, there's the guilt of knowing they can't save everybody, but there's the pride in knowing they did the best they could. And so what ends up happening is, in the middle of all of this, Batman shows up with his mother box at the same time that Superman arrives. And so what ends up going on is Amanda Waller takes over the body of the Brainiac Queen with her programming, and then literally uses like an emergency override, right? And it's like, you are now controlled by me. And then she tries to destroy John, but Batman shows up with the mother box and then teleports the Brainiac Queen to Pluto. Now, it's not going to be enough to keep her gone permanently, but it is enough to get her out of the way momentarily. Superman at that moment shows up on the scene, and there's this really touching moment between himself, right? Where he's like, you saved us all, right? Like, your ability to resist the Brainiac Queen is what kept all of us from dying, because you would have killed us all. One, because most of us wouldn't have been able to stop you, and two, I don't know if I could have brought myself to kill you. So it's a really, really touching moment there. But then you pick up with Batman confronting John Starr, and he says, you're coming with us, Starr. And where Starr's like, why? The response of Batman is, because you know, Starr, don't you? You know how to get everyone's powers back. And so what you do here is you pick up with the last page of Absolute Power 3, when you pick up with Barry after he had gotten to that base, right? Waller's Supermax sub-basement. And he says, okay, Mystery Voice, if you can hear me, I'm where you told me to go. And oh my God, that's a transmatter machine. And the map, my map of the multiverse, the one that I've been charting, how? And the response of this person, how else? She's stolen. Like, she's taken everything else and she's using it. And that's where Barry finishes the sentence and is like, oh my God, she's using it to build a multiversal army. And as he says that, alternate reality versions of the Flash are speeding up on this guy. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. I'm leaving you guys on a massive cliffhanger. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Make sure you click this playlist to get caught up, and I will catch you all later. Peace.